In our chaotic, complex, volatile world of clickbait headlines and fake news, it's sometimes easy to lose sight of just how often we normalize social trends that wouldn't be out of place in a novel by Charles Dickens, except the central role is played by modern technology. In this episode, we'll focus on a well-established trend in Japan that appears to be widely accepted as an unavoidable symptom of the way things are. Many viewers will be aware of the term sugar daddy, which the dictionary describes as a rich, older man who gives money or gifts to someone younger, in exchange for companionship or sexual favors. Japan is by no means the only country where brokering such arrangements via apps and websites has become a highly profitable enterprise. For native speakers, Papa-katsu, which translates directly as daddy activity, implies a perfectly innocent, platonic relationship. This helps to disguise the extent to which intergenerational matchmaking platforms are essentially providing escort services, which can all too often become a discrete form of prostitution. The more direct term for these transactional relationships is Ainjo Kosai. Ainjo means aid or support, and Kosai means congress or intercourse. But in a society where kawaii culture rules, and the average late-night TV show feels like it's aimed at toddlers, the euphemistic term Papa-katsu is the equivalent of sugar dating in other countries. And as regular viewers will know, this channel doesn't like to sugarcoat sexual exploitation. According to one online survey, 1 in 10 young women between the age of 20 and 30 are currently engaged in Papa-katsu. A few claim that they can earn up to $1,000 a month from 1 to 2 hour dates without sex, and simply see it as a more efficient alternative to a regular part-time job. But many of these young women are aspiring models or actors, and are very much the exception, not the rule. It is estimated that only 5% of women can earn healthy sums from dating alone. Their ideal is to find an exceptionally wealthy man who will install them in a luxury apartment and pay them a generous allowance. Clubs with high admission and membership fees ensure a steady supply of high-value customers for these women, who are also less likely to be cheated out of their money. In recent years, the use of Papa-katsu apps has become popular with less wealthy men who don't fit the profile of a traditional sugar daddy. With such a large percentage of young women using these apps, the overall market price continues to fall to a level that more and more men can afford. Given decades of wage stagnation in Japan, the apps are becoming a more affordable alternative to licensed hostess and sex clubs. As a result, the majority of girls now negotiate with new customers themselves, to avoid incurring the cost of a middleman taking a cut. But it should come as no surprise then, that year on year, disputes between girls and customers are on the rise. Even assuming there are no payment issues, it has become common for women to receive less than 5,000 yen, around $36, for a date, lasting just over 2 hours. If this includes sexual services offered by use of the code word adult, the average price is still less than 30,000 yen, or around $218. Reports of violence or surreptitious video recordings are not uncommon. But most victims know it's pointless to report these incidents to the police, especially since the legality of these technologically facilitated arrangements remains a gray area. It is only in recent years that a number of high-profile cases have been reported by legacy media. Most often because Papa-katsu has been linked to the murder of young women, and occasionally men. For adult women, not covered by the Child Welfare Act of 1947, discouraging soliciting in public places is the key focus of anti-prostitution laws. Unless there is incontrovertible evidence that a party is knowingly and deliberately facilitating prostitution, private arrangements tend to fall into the category of affairs between consenting adults. The fact that everyone knows precisely how these apps are being used has no legal bearing, allowing the brokers to operate openly as legitimate businesses. The popular myth that helps everyone to turn a blind eye says that these young women are motivated by a frivolous desire for high-end trinkets, designer clothes, designer handbags, or the venal pursuit of celebrity status on Instagram or other social media platforms. And in a very small number of cases, there may be a grain of truth in that. But dig a little deeper, and a very different picture emerges. Paying tuition fees and repaying student loans are very high on the list of reasons why young women take up sugar dating. In the past, it was common for parents to pay tuition fees and contribute to living costs, which meant a majority of students only had to work part-time to top up their income. However, over the past 30 years of wage stagnation, so-called labor-saving advances in technology have in fact reduced productivity and increased average working hours, not least because everyone is effectively on call 24/7. Just like everywhere else in the world, the gap between an obscenely wealthy minority and increasingly impoverished majority continues to widen, despite 90% of Japanese people self-identifying as middle class before recent upheavals in global finance. There are a number of academic studies from around the world that highlight the negative impact of study time lost to the demands of paid work, which has prompted a global trend for increasing numbers of female students to become sex workers, attracted by the flexible hours and higher rates of return. But students are by no means the only women driven into Papa-katsu by economic necessity. The continuing, largely unreported decline in Japan's economic status has had a disproportionate impact on the earning power of women, most especially young women who on average earn $2,200 less than their male counterparts, who are themselves struggling. For many in full-time employment, it is simply impossible to make ends meet, and employers actively encourage them to take on a side hustle. Are they to blame for taking this literally, after a long, taxing day in a suffocating office? Social networks are full of enchanting fairy stories about young women living in the lap of luxury courtesy of their generous sugar daddy. It has established a competitive culture of envy that drives girls to spend significant amounts of their earnings on plastic surgery, beauty treatments, and designer products, in a bid to become one of the lucky few. The price that customers are willing to offer during those preliminary negotiations is seen as a direct reflection of their value, based solely on appearance, since very few men are interested in their intelligence or conversational ability. Every negotiation reinforces the message that their bodies are commodities, and that this is the sole, credible measure of their value. Not surprisingly, such psychological snares make it harder for young women to break out and escape the Papa-katsu life. It becomes a quest for approval measured in banknotes. But in some cases, the level of coercion is more direct and explicit. In a previous episode, we highlighted how host and hostess clubs will often manipulate customers into spending huge sums in a competitive bid to gain exclusive access to their favorite companion. Addiction to the attention they receive from paid hosts has driven a number of young women from middle-class families to abandon Papa-katsu in favor of offering sex for a $100 or less outside the local ward office. The proceeds from 3 to 5 customers per night are then almost immediately spent back in the nearby host club, where their elusive ideal partners shower the women with attention and praise. But if this feels like the psychological equivalent of standing in between two funhouse mirrors and getting caught up in an unending cycle of reality distortion, despite disclaimers in bold fonts that matchmaking sites and apps prohibit unlawful use by escorts, prostitutes, and human traffickers, the fact remains that sugar dating in Japan enjoys the same reputation it garners elsewhere in the world as a form of prostitution. And it is growing at an equally alarming rate, in direct proportion to growing economic inequality. But the intersection with well-established practices in Japan's sex industry, as in the examples above, helps to obscure the full significance of this new trend, just as the gaudy, heritage industry celebrations of Oiran obscure an economic history of child sexual exploitation. Papa-katsu customers offer equally colorful explanations for their use of these services. It seems the majority are driven by an overwhelming, unselfish desire to help others. A powerful, psychological need to help young women feel good about themselves. In some cases, they claim to be fathers who were unable to forge a strong connection with their daughters due to work demands, and now feel compelled to transfer their affection to a paid surrogate. For some, it's a more straightforward fetishization of payment demands and the sheer joy of surrendering hard-earned cash. You don't need to be an expert in Nietzschean philosophy to figure out that power and status are the common driving force. It has become unpopular to suggest that social problems are anything more than the failure of individuals to take responsibility for self-actualizing through a non-stop process of self-improvement and personal branding. Success, we're told, is largely a result of presenting your best self to the world. And we see this across social media, as perfectly ordinary men and women present a fantasy version of their lifestyles and offer sagely advice to their peers about how to get ahead. Self-help books dominate bestseller lists, despite the majority being the literary equivalent of a Ponzi scheme. More and more young people are opting for plastic surgery as a preventative measure. Behind the ideal, tate-mare image that dominates polite conversation, the honne, or ugly truth, is that a majority of Japanese people are exhausted by the daily challenge to survive, despite being ranked as one of the world's leading economies. Media-driven infantilization offers a welcome escape from the demented complexities of a world stuck in a regressive loop that sees a majority of young people facing an impossibly steep challenge to afford even a basic level of independence, let alone match or surpass the economic achievements of their aging parents and grandparents. And in an infantilized society, youth and innocence become valuable, sought-after commodities. In this context, it is perhaps perfectly reasonable to say that Papa-katsu is just a symptom of the way things are, especially in Japan. But what happened to the idea of changing the way things are? Most aspects of Japanese society and culture revolve around preserving the status quo. So much so that no one really notices the entropy that is beginning to threaten the very things that make Japanese society special and unique, such as low rates of crime. If you're wondering what young men are doing while young women are courting solutions to economic hardship, be sure to check out our next video, which will explore the dark gig economy that is reported to lie behind a recent series of high-profile crimes. Let us know what you think about sugar dating in the comments, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.